So Stan, I am looking at a Jamestown Bar Association, and you don't have it in front of you, composite of 1967. And there's a younger Stan Lundine in the composite. Was that a law, something that you were destined to do? Was that a goal?
Well, yes. From the time I was in junior high school, I think I wanted to be a lawyer. I don't know who inspired that exactly, but I did want to become a lawyer. And when I graduated from NYU Law School in '64, I thought about, I was then clerking in a huge New York City law firm, and that didn't appeal to me, but I tried to see if I could hook up with, like you did, with a Buffalo or a Rochester law firm, and just didn't work out. And Al Ford offered me to come in, and he'd make me a partner as soon as I was admitted. So I did.
What was the connection with Al Ford?
Well, he had represented my dad in business, and so that was the large connection.
So you came back here pretty much after law school, came to Jamestown.
Right.
And what kind of practice was Al's practice?
Well, he had a diverse practice, certainly. He did a lot of real estate. He didn't do much trial work. In fact, once I joined him, I did most of the trial work that came our way. But then halfway through my 5-year law practice, I joined the public defender's office as an assistant public defender. That was a great experience. I mean, I tried a felony case the first time I
Really?
actually went before a jury.
So who was the judge at the time? Who was the county court judge?
O'Connor.
O'Connor?
And Ed O'Connor. And
We've heard stories about him.
Yeah.
Okay, give me your best
Well,
story.
he would substitute vodka for water in the jug on his bench. And if you had to plead a case, it was always hard to know whether to do it in the morning or the afternoon, because in the afternoon he might be gracious and lenient, or he might be, send this guy to prison, you know. and you never quite knew, but it was quite an experience. And there were a lot of characters, you know. Lee Town Adams was practicing law, not a judge yet, and Willard Cass Sr.
Right.
And I used to love to go to calendar call, because these old lawyers would sit around and tell stories, and you'd learn more colorful examples of the law business that way.
Did your paths cross with Mike Lombardo's?
Oh yeah, yeah. First case, I guess the first case I actually tried before a jury was in city court, and Mike Lombardo was on the other side. I don't recall exactly what the issue was, but I kept trying to get some evidence admitted, and Mike would object, and the judge would sustain his objection. And this went on, I reworded it 3 or 4 times, and finally I got it admitted, and it proved his case. I mean, that was Mike. You know, he just sort of kicked the dirt, you know, easygoing guy, but he was shrewd.
Yeah.
And I learned something.
Did your paths also cross with Tubi Scarpino?
Yeah, Tubi sent a lot of law business my way, because he liked to talk about the law, but he didn't really want to do a lot, certainly not any court cases. So he'd send divorces and other court cases to me.
As in the public defender's office, who was the public defender at the time?
Well, Bill Arison was my, he provided more insight into the law and useful guidance than anybody else, and so that was a very good experience.
And so, Bill, how would it work? Would Bill was a public defender. Did he try felony cases?
Oh yeah, yeah. In fact, we had a murder case, and that was just really, obviously I just assisted, but that was really interesting. A woman in Mayville was accused of murder of her husband, and everybody in town hated the husband and liked this woman, and I was up in the jail late one night, and I went and saw her, and she broke down crying and admitted to me that she hadn't killed her husband, that her son had. And she said, I've had a miserable life, and I'll go to prison, but I don't want him to have to follow the path that I've been on. And I went back and told Bill, and we went and got the two most famous advocates in the country who were both medical doctors and forensic pathologists, one at Harvard and one in Pittsburgh. And they came, and she was one-armed, and they came and testified that she couldn't possibly have shot the weapon with one arm.
Yeah.
And we got her acquitted. And then they did, I don't recall just how, but they called the son before the family court, and I went in with him, and the family court judge, now I can't recall who that was, the family court judge at the time, understood, and he said, young man, I'm going to let you go, and you be careful and don't forget this experience. So it was a great experience.
Your office was in the Wellman building,
Yes,
right?
it was.
And was there other attorneys who came through while you were with Al?
Oh yeah, Bill Cass.
Bill did?
Yeah, he was right by the elevator on the 4th floor of the Wellman building, and we were on the 4th floor. So Bill Cass Jr.,
Yeah.
the one you know, and he was a very active lawyer. And other lawyers were in the building. You asked about Mike Lombardo. Pickard and Lombardo were in the building too.
Sam Conti? Was he
Yes, yes, Sam Conti and Sam Edson too.
Marcus Conley?
I don't recall if his office was, I think he was in the Hotel Jamestown, but I'm not sure.
Way back, well, subsequently when I came involved, I remember going over to the Wellman, and Marcus really retired, but he was there. He had an office there. Was that the sort of the hub of the lawyers in that Wellman building?
Well, it was equally divided between the Fenton building, the Wellman building, and the hotel.
Right.
I think the Hotel Jamestown was the prestige place at the time, but but there were about equal numbers in all three places.
Did you have anybody come with Ford and Lundine? Was there anybody there?
We did. A guy named Bruce Carpenter was actually up in Mayville. We made an affiliation with Gene DeMambro, and then Bruce Carpenter came. He was a brilliant appellate lawyer and took several cases, not just of ours, but other lawyers to, I think he actually went several times to the Court of Appeals, the High Court in New York.
Yeah, the law firm name was Wooden and Carpenter at one point. Does the name Wooden mean anything to you?
No, it doesn't.
So as you were doing that litigation, and much of it on the public defender's side as opposed to prosecution, do you get a sense that that helped you shape some of your social justice things, beliefs, as you kind of became into the public sector?
Well, the one thing you learn is that you thought you knew society. You only knew half of society, and you got to know the other half as an assistant public defender. It probably had some impact on my social justice viewpoints, but I'd like to think if I was an assistant district attorney, I would have also had that kind of view, but I don't know.
Did Al, being in part of that, being in the law profession, was that a logical leap for you then to get into the political part of it, or had you always been politically tuned in?
I was interested in politics right from the beginning. I actually worked in John F. Kennedy's 1960 campaign, both here and down in North Carolina, where I was in college at the time. And so I was interested, and I thought in 1964, I actually did a little advance work for Robert Kennedy when he was running for the Senate. He came to Jamestown, 10,000 people on Cherry Street, and my biggest job was to keep people off the platform because I thought it was going to collapse with everybody that wanted to be standing by him. But I running for mayor was just sort of out of the blue. Wasn't anything that I had planned on or anything, but I was on the city planning commission and somewhat frustrated that I thought we had some good plans to improve and revitalize the city, and they weren't getting implemented very well, I didn't think. So I did run in 1969.
You were obviously won, and the rest is history. Were you able, and I don't know the answer, to be a mayor, and could you still practice law? Could you still?
Legally you could.
Yeah.
And for the first 2 years, I kept the affiliation with Ford and Lundine, but I mean, I was so busy as mayor and then you had conflicts of interest issues, so obviously you couldn't do anything with regard to the city. So I withdrew and didn't practice at all after 1971.
Did Al do something? Did he get somebody else, or did he? Was he just a sole practitioner?
Well, I think he actually formed a partnership with Gene DeMambro,
Okay.
whose office was in Mayville, and for some of that time, Bruce Carpenter stayed with them.
I'm going to give you some, just throw names at you, see if you have a story or two. Sam Alessi Sr., did your past, was he around then?
I met him, but I didn't get to know him very well. Of course, I knew Sam Jr.
You talked about flying out with him. And
Yes.
Les Berglund?
He was city court judge, and as I said, I had tried a couple cases there, but I didn't get to know Judge Berglund real well.
Roland Fancher?
Yes. I'll tell you one story about Roland Fancher and me. When I was mayor, I heard rumors that they were going to try to indict me for something having to do with the Jamestown General Hospital or the urban renewal. When you're innocent, you don't know what they're talking about. And I got a hold, Judge Fancher had retired, and I got a hold of Roland Fancher, and I said, I know you're not practicing law, and I know you're retired, but would you represent me?
Yeah.
Because I hear these rumors and I don't know. And he said, well, I don't want any fee. let me check into it. And he said, you've got a friend up in Mayville named Bill Young, who was the court clerk. And he said, he gave me the whole scoop. And they are trying to indict you, but I took care of it. And you'll never be indicted. And I'll tell you who was behind it. And I'm not going to tell you that, but I haven't ever forgotten who was behind it. Sullivan was the district attorney, and he was pretty weak, frankly. And they tried to pressure him, just get an indictment. Whether he's guilty or not, that's not a problem, but we just want to get an indictment. That'll take care of him politically.
Oh my gosh. McKinley Phillips?
I did not know.
Bob Booty?
Yeah, I met Booty. I always associated him with Lakewood. I don't know exactly why.
He was the attorney for Lakewood forever.
Yeah.
Forever. D. Lawrence Carlson?
No, I did not know him.
Let's see. Erickson and Erickson, that'd be Elton Erickson and Phil Erickson?
Yeah, Phil Erickson. I had a few matters, I think mostly real estate with Phil.
Lynn Hartley, did you?
Oh yeah, oh, of course, yeah. Lynn was a really good guy and a very capable lawyer.
All right, give me your best Terry Duro story.
Oh, Terry Duro. I had almost forgotten. Obviously, see, Al Ford was Albanian. Phony Greek, we called him. And so was Terry Duro. So there was both some crossover and some rivalry there. Terry Duro was a character. I don't have a great story, I don't recall, but he was a real character, and you never knew what he was going to do. And so, basically, guided by Al Ford, I carefully tread where Terry Duro was concerned.
Well, and his brother Tom, of course, was seemingly to me, the master of ceremonies of everything.
Oh yes, yes.
You know, kind of that 5x5 guy.
What a character he was too.
Howard Crossley.
Yes, Howard was a brilliant lawyer, really, but you wanted to get him in the morning because he went and drank his lunch, basically, and in the afternoon, I don't know whether he snoozed or what, but you wouldn't get much done with Howard in the afternoon. But he was a very smart lawyer.
Yeah. And loved to, he was an actor, he was a thespian, so
yes.
We caught him at Surrogate's Court when we all kind of huddled around.
Right.
And he was just a show. Al McKee. Did your paths cross with that?
Very slight contact with Al McKee.
Was Russ Rogerson around then?
Yes. Actually, when I had to do the admission to the bar, Russell Rogerson was the guy that interviewed me. Turned out later he didn't have such great ethics, I guess, but he interviewed me, and I was actually sworn in Rochester, where the appellate division was, but Russell Rogerson was the local attorney that did your interview.
For the Character and Fitness.
Yes.
Yeah. I had a guy named Frank Melanzi, similarly aged at the time. It's just old
Didn't
lawyer.
know him.
Offline. Lucian.
Yeah.
Did you think of characters?
Yes, yeah, Lucian was a real character. What the hell do you want? When you walked into his office. And I was told in advance, I think it was Harrison, I'm not sure who, but don't be intimidated by the growl. Behind that is a good lawyer and a good man, and he was.
Where did you go for lunch You know, there's this time period. We went to Lysandro's at my time period, but did you go to Gandy's? Did you go to Tommy's? You know, the group gathering, the town club. What was your?
Well, the best place was Marty's
Yes.
on 2nd Street, and basically it was lawyers and judges and criminals that were there. In fact, when I became lieutenant governor, I was presiding, which I didn't do very often, but one day, and in the morning paper in Albany, I had read where 33 people in Jamestown got arrested for illegal betting on Super Bowl Sunday. And I called Just Present up to the podium. Everybody there probably thought we were talking local issues or something, but I guess it was in a sense. I said, Jess, I read in the paper where 33 people got arrested, and I said, who was it? He says, your friends and mine. All the guys at Marty's that were running numbers and taking bets.
Yeah.
But actually, I think right while I was practicing, that was where Howard Crossley went, and I didn't go and have vodka martinis like Hugh Carr, and Hugh was amazing. I mean, he wasn't a lawyer. He was president of the telephone company at a young age, and he could go and drink 2 martinis and go back to work and work just fine.
Yeah.
But
it's beyond me. So, were those, you know, remember Lucian and Doug Spoto and guys that would just, when you'd see them at Lysandro's, the histrionics that they went on over an easement or a right-of-way, it was pure theater. Did you have guys like that were just, you wanted to kind of hang around simply because they were pure theater?
oh yeah, Tubi Scarpino was one of them, and Willard Cass Sr., what a character he was. They say, I didn't actually see him try a case, but they say he was a brilliant trial lawyer, but he would go off on benders, and he'd be gone for days.
Really?
And his wife wouldn't know where he was or anything, and he'd come back and apologize to everybody and go right about his business. But what a character he was. And as I said, I just used to love Calendar Call because he was a character, and Lee Town Adams, of course, was, and Crossley, and a number of them.
Was Arthur, he's a little older than you, Art Bailey, was he at that time active in the local bar?
Not really. He came a little before me, but he was new in practice. And he had a partner. I can't recall who his partner was. But yeah, I knew Art, and I had a couple of matters with him, but never tried a case exactly against him, but he was new to the practice.
Was Ernie Calcroft, was he practicing then?
Well, he was a figure at the round table at the town club, and I got invited over there by Fred Dunn, and Cockcroft was like the chairman of the board there, and I don't know how much he practiced at that time, but he was still a figure in Jamestown law.
Who was that? You know, we talk about the round table, and you've heard Sam Alessi Jr. talk about that, but who were really the principals of that?
Oh, remember? Goodness, you're challenging my memory. I
know Pete Davis was probably one of them. He was Jamestown Electroplating. I've heard his name. And certainly Sam Alessi, Sr.
Yeah.
And Ernest Calcroft. But that was...
and Fred Dunn was a regular there.
Was it party related? Or was there just kind of business related? How did it?
No, it was prominent people in Jamestown, and of course they would always tease Cockcroft because he was a bachelor, and they'd say that he was caught at a house of ill repute and when it caught on fire and had to go out the window. I don't think that was true, but
It's a good story.
that was the story at the round table. Whenever he'd use his seniority, somebody would bring that up.
Was Charlie Goodell practicing at that time?
No. Charlie had gone to Washington. Well, actually, by the time I went into practice, he was congressman. But he came back, I think, knowing that Reed, who had been forever our congressman, Daniel Reed, from Dunkirk, was ill. And I think Charlie came back, probably practiced a couple of years, but basically to run for Congress around 1960, 61. And so I knew him. My mom worked as a receptionist for Dr. Goodell and Dr. Rappel, so I knew the family. And of course, John Goodell was practicing law.
Right. Gerald Herrick. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah. There's another partnership that I can't recall, but
Well, that kind of goes back to Jackson, somebody, Herrick, and Leet.
yes,
Leet, too.
Ernie Leet, yeah. Ernie Leet was actually still
Was he?
practicing when I came back, yeah. And yeah, he was involved in Jackson's practice, I guess.
Yeah, right at the tail end. And Ernie always was the sewer king. I mean, when it came to sewer projects and stuff, Ernie was it. And if you had a real estate deal with Ernie, I remember, again, this is a kid who knew nothing, but every real estate deal turned into a constitutional law issue. You would just cringe.
Yeah, yeah.
Sherry Cadwell, who was my mentor,
Yes,
and Bob Sharp, they just say, "Oh God, Greg, good luck.
yeah.
You take it."
Right. Yeah, well, he was a learned lawyer, but I guess probably didn't know when to stop. But
now that we're in the weeds of this 5-year time period where you're practicing, is there a story or two that I should be asking you about that I would not necessarily know? That you'd say, Greg, you probably didn't know this about me as a lawyer.
I don't think so. I did all kinds of law. I mean, I did a lot of matrimonial law because other lawyers didn't want it and they'd refer cases to you. And I'd take it almost anything. But no, I don't think there's any aspect of that I need to, or that you wouldn't know.
Now tell me about you became mayor, and then obviously you have to have a lawyer for the city, corporation counsel. You had, I think Mark Hampton might have been your first.
No, Bob Alessi.
Bob Alessi, okay.
The story was that I had asked Sam Alessi to be corporation counsel, and I didn't know it, but he lived one house outside of the city limits. And Warren Erickson, who was on the city council at that time, intended to object to when I nominated Sam Alessi. And I went to Sam, and I found out about that. Thankfully, I think it was a Republican, came to me and said, Mayor Lundine, watch out. And actually the city hall was under construction at the time, so we had it down at Jamestown Community College, and I'll never forget it. And Sam came to me and said, yeah, you can't have a corporation counsel who doesn't live in the city, so I think my brother Bob would do it. So you should have seen the look on Warren Erickson's face when I nominated Robert Alessi
Oh,
as
my God.
the corporation counsel, because he wasn't expecting that. And Mark Hampton came along as an associate. I had great associates. Bill Evans was another associate corporation counsel. And I kind of used it to get some bright young lawyers and attract them to Jamestown, actually. So that was great. And not that Bob was a figurehead, but the associates were really good young lawyers. He became an associate with Al Ford after I had become
okay.
mayor.
And then, did he then become, was he associate counsel, general counsel, corporation counsel when you were there, or had
No,
you left by then?
that was after me. Yeah.
Yeah, he told me the story about the lot. A lot that apparently
Yeah.
was,
Yeah.
you had to own, rather than reside in some lower level, somebody started there.
Yeah.
Anyways, this has been great. This has been
Thank you.
such a hoot. And we look forward to having you.
Oh, let me tell you one mayor story
Sure.
that I may have told you before, but I don't know. You were talking about sewers, and the worst thing for a mayor is if you have to replace the central sewer in the middle of Jamestown and through Brooklyn Square. And it was a mess. I mean, inevitably, you know. And Lobox was a furniture or a appliance store down in Brooklyn Square, and I knew Herman. In fact, I think we represented him on something or another, and I thought, well, rather than waiting for him to come up to the mayor's office, I'm going to go down and see him. I walk into this appliance store, and there's dust on the refrigerators, and oh, it was a mess. And I says, Herman, how's business? And he says, business is like sex. When it's good, it's very good. When it's bad, it's not so bad. I said, Herman, I wanted to hug him. I said, I love you.
I gotta use that. That's fantastic. Just as mayor, inevitably you got to get up in front of city council and speak and present your position. And often there's the opposition that you see more often than not. And usually it's headed by a lawyer or two who gets up and articulates a opposite view. Was there one or two folks in the bar who you kind of knew when they were in the audience, they were there to pontificate?
No, I don't recall a single lawyer that was that way. We had one lady, I don't recall her first name, but Mrs. Johnson, who came and spoke at the citizen opportunity to speak every city council meeting. But I don't recall lawyers who, I mean, as I referenced earlier, Warren Erickson was, I think he was practicing law then. I'm not sure about that, but he was on the city council and he was the primary opposition. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. We won in '69 and we had 12 members of the city council and we carried 8. Mm-hmm. They had won all 12 2 years before, and Jim Whitmire was a Republican councilman who you could deal with, was really good, able guy representing the north side. I don't remember the other two.
Well, this has been great.